The galaxy was in chaos. A dark, powerful empire from a distant star system had set its eyes on conquering everything in its path. The Valdar Empire, with its fleets of massive warships and ruthless armies, had already conquered dozens of worlds, and now they were headed for the human colonies. The news came in a chilling broadcast. Across the galaxy, in every space station and every home, screens flickered to life with a message from the Valdar Emperor himself. His voice was cold, filled with the confidence of a ruler who had never known defeat. The Valdar Empire declares war. Surrender now, or face total annihilation. Across human-controlled space, fear spread like wildfire. The humans had heard the stories. The Valdar's unstoppable warships, their ruthless soldiers, their ability to crush any resistance in moments. Entire planets had fallen under the weight of their might. And now, it was humanity's turn to face them. On Earth, in a dark war room deep beneath the surface, military leaders and scientists gathered. They had no illusions. The Valdar were coming, and they were coming with the full force of their empire. The human fleets, though strong, were small compared to the Valdar war machine. The ships they had built over decades could not hope to match the overwhelming firepower of the Valdar. But they had something the Valdar could never expect, something the Empire had never faced before: humanity's will to fight. Commander Rachel Harper, a seasoned veteran of countless space battles, stood before the gathered commanders and military officers. Her face was grim but resolute. "The Valdar think they can crush us easily," she said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "They think we'll surrender. But we will show them that humanity doesn't back down." The room was silent for a moment as the weight of her words sank in. No one had ever faced a threat like this before. The Valdar had destroyed entire civilizations without blinking. What could humanity possibly do to stop them? But Rachel's words weren't just empty promises. She was the leader of a special project, one that might just give them a fighting chance. The U.S. Intrepid, a top-secret ship, had been under construction for years. Built with advanced technology far beyond anything the Valdar had seen, it was humanity's last hope, and it was ready for deployment. The U.S. Intrepid wasn't just another warship. It was a technological marvel, designed not only for battle but for survival in the face of overwhelming odds. With an advanced AI system, stealth capabilities, and weapons that could cripple even the toughest of enemy ships, the Intrepid was humanity's final line of defense. The crew was handpicked from the best of humanity's military forces, people who had trained for years for a mission they never thought they'd need to carry out. They were ready to face whatever came their way. But there was one question they couldn't answer: would it be enough? As the U.S. Intrepid prepared to launch, the Valdar fleet was already moving toward Earth's colony worlds. Ships of every size and shape filled the stars, their weapons primed for destruction. The humans had no idea how powerful the Valdar truly were, but they knew one thing: the time for diplomacy was over. War had begun. On the bridge of the Intrepid, Commander Harper took a deep breath. She had seen battles before, but this was different. This wasn't just another mission. It was the survival of humanity itself. "Helm, set course for the Valdar fleet," she ordered. "We're going to stop them, no matter what it takes." As the ship powered up and slipped into warp speed, Harper's mind raced. She thought of her family back home, of the billions of people depending on her to protect them. The Valdar would not be easy to defeat. They had vast fleets, advanced weapons, and a cold, calculating strategy that had crushed every species that had dared to resist them. But Harper knew something the Valdar didn't. Humanity wasn't like the other civilizations they had conquered. Humans had a way of fighting when everything seemed lost. They were unpredictable, determined, and fiercely protective of their own. And while the Valdar had strength, humans had something even more powerful: hope. The journey to the Valdar fleet was long, but the U.S. Intrepid was ready. The crew had trained for months, preparing for every possible scenario. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew this was their chance to show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. As they approached the outer reaches of the Valdar fleet, Commander Harper looked out the view screen. A massive, terrifying armada loomed ahead, ships that dwarfed the Intrepid in size and power. The ships were already beginning their approach toward the human colonies, their weapons locked and loaded. "Status report," Harper said, her voice steady. "Approaching enemy fleet, Commander." The communications officer replied. "The Valdar are already on their way to the first human colony. We've got no time to waste." The tension on the bridge was palpable. The fate of billions of lives rested on their shoulders. The Intrepid was just one ship, small compared to the massive enemy fleet. But it had something the Valdar didn't, the element of surprise. And with that, humanity's greatest weapon, hope, was about to be put to the test. The battle was about to begin. The U.S. Intrepid emerged from warp space, the vastness of space stretching endlessly in all directions. The blackness seemed to swallow the ship, and the stars appeared like tiny diamonds scattered across a cold canvas. Commander Rachel Harper stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes fixed on the view screen. It was there that she saw them. An armada of ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. The Valdar fleet had arrived. The Intrepid was dwarfed by the enemy's vessels, massive warships with dark, angular hulls that seemed built to instill fear. They bristled with weapons, laser cannons, missile launchers, and energy shields that could absorb any human weaponry. The Valdar ships were far beyond anything the human fleet could ever match in terms of firepower and size. "We're outmatched, Commander," Lieutenant Jameson, the tactical officer, said, his voice tight with tension. He was staring at the readout, which showed dozens of enemy ships closing in fast. "I know," Harper replied, her voice calm but determined. "But we're not here to fight them head-on. We're here to stop them from reaching our colonies. We're the last line of defense." The U.S. Intrepid was humanity's last hope, but it was small. It wasn't designed for a full-scale confrontation. It was designed to strike at the heart of the enemy's weakness, to use its advanced technology and unorthodox tactics to outsmart a foe that seemed unbeatable. Captain Ensign Daniels spoke up from the communications console. "We've just received a message from Earth. The Valdar have already begun their assault on the nearest colony. We have to act now." Harper's face hardened. There was no time to waste. She quickly turned to her crew. "Prepare the ship for combat. I want all systems online and ready to go. Get us into range of that fleet. We need to strike first, before they can advance." As the crew worked quickly, Harper's mind raced. She thought of the human colonies, of the families and civilians that had no idea what was coming for them. She thought of Earth itself, how the Valdar were likely targeting their home planet first. The pressure was overwhelming, but she couldn't show it. The crew needed to see that she was in control, that she believed they could win this impossible fight. The Intrepid moved forward, and as it approached the enemy fleet, Harper gave a final order. "Helm, initiate evasive maneuvers. We're not going to just sit here and wait for them to fire. Let's make them think twice about attacking us." The crew worked in perfect unison. They had trained for this, preparing for the worst. They knew that the Valdar fleet was powerful, but the Intrepid had something the Valdar didn't: speed, agility, and technology the Empire had never seen. The ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a tool for survival. Its advanced AI was designed to outthink, outmaneuver, and outblast even the most advanced enemies. Suddenly, the first blast of laser fire ripped through the void, a blinding streak of light aimed directly at them. The Intrepid swerved, narrowly avoiding the shot. The Valdar were aggressive, opening fire without hesitation, showing no mercy. The ship's shields absorbed the blow, but Harper knew that it wouldn't take many hits before they were compromised. "Return fire," Harper commanded. Jameson's fingers flew over the controls, and the Intrepid fired back, its advanced energy weapons striking the nearest Valdar ship. The blast hit its shields, but the enemy vessel seemed unfazed. It retaliated instantly, firing a barrage of missiles that filled the screen. "Hold steady," Harper shouted. The Intrepid was fast, but the Valdar's numbers were overwhelming. We can't keep dodging like this. We need to find a way to break their formation. That's when it hit her. This wasn't about raw power. The Valdar relied on their superior numbers and overwhelming firepower, but that made them predictable. The Intrepid had the advantage of surprise and innovation. She quickly turned to her chief engineer, Lieutenant Commander Ruiz. "Do we have the new systems online?" she asked. Ruiz nodded. "Yes, Commander. The stealth systems are ready, and the electromagnetic pulse is set to go." Harper gave him a sharp look. "Use them. We're going to break their formation from the inside." Ruiz didn't hesitate. He activated the ship's cloaking system, and for a moment, the Intrepid vanished from the sensors, blending into the surrounding darkness. The Valdar fleet continued its assault, oblivious to the human ship's sudden disappearance. The crew held their breath. This was their only chance to strike. "Get us in close to the lead ship," Harper ordered, her voice low and steady. "Once we're there, we hit them with everything we've got." The Intrepid moved like a shadow, slipping through the Valdar's formation. It was a daring move, but it was the only one that might work. As they approached the lead ship, the tension grew. Harper's mind was focused, her every thought on the mission ahead. Finally, they were in position. "Now, Ruiz," Harper said. "EMP pulse. Hit them hard." Ruiz pressed a button, and an intense pulse of energy shot out from the Intrepid. The electromagnetic wave rippled through the Valdar ships, disrupting their communications and rendering their weapon systems temporarily useless. For a moment, the entire Valdar fleet seemed to falter. The Intrepid's sudden strike had thrown them into chaos. The lead ship was now vulnerable, and the crew was ready to strike again. "We've got them on the ropes," Jameson said, his voice filled with excitement. "Now's our chance to take them down." But even as the Intrepid pressed its advantage, Harper knew this was only the beginning. The Valdar might have been momentarily stunned, but they wouldn't stay down for long. The fight for humanity's survival was just getting started. The Intrepid was a symbol of humanity's will to fight, but against an empire like the Valdar. Every victory was hard-earned, and every second counted. The U.S. Intrepid was in the heart of the Valdar fleet, surrounded by ships far larger and more powerful than their own. The pulse from the electromagnetic strike had disrupted the Valdar systems, but it was only temporary. As the seconds ticked by, the Intrepid's crew knew they couldn't rely on that advantage for long. They had to move fast and keep the pressure on. "Status report," Commander Rachel Harper said, her voice calm but her eyes narrowed in concentration. She stood tall at the front of the bridge, watching the view screen intently. The Valdar ships had momentarily stopped firing, but they were already beginning to recover. "Shields are holding," Lieutenant Jameson reported, his fingers flying over the tactical console. "But their lead ship is already re-establishing power. We won't have much time before they can fire back." Harper clenched her jaw. "We need to act fast. What's our next move?" Lieutenant Commander Ruiz, the ship's chief engineer, spoke up. "We still have a few tricks up our sleeves, Commander. The Valdar don't know about the Intrepid's other systems. If we can get close enough, we can disable their weapons using a direct EMP surge through their core systems. It'll take them out of the fight for good, but we have to get within their ship's defensive range." The plan was risky. Getting too close meant exposing the Intrepid to direct fire. But they were already in the belly of the beast. The odds of surviving if they didn't act quickly were even slimmer. "We don't have the luxury of time," Harper said, making up her mind. "We're going in." The crew sprang into action, working together with a sense of urgency that only comes from facing an impossible situation. The Intrepid slid into position, moving with calculated precision, using its speed to avoid the few remaining attacks from the Valdar ships. Each movement was a desperate dance in the shadows, the ship darting through gaps in the enemy's formations. "Hold steady," Harper said. "We're almost there." As the Intrepid closed in on the Valdar flagship, the tension on the bridge became almost unbearable. The massive ship loomed ahead, its dark, jagged form sending waves of cold dread through the crew. The Valdar flagship was where the heart of the Empire's power lay. If they could take it down, the entire fleet might collapse. But if they failed, it would mean the end for the Intrepid and the last hope for humanity. "Target locked," Jameson called out, his voice filled with determination. "We're within range." "Do it," Harper ordered. With a swift motion, Ruiz triggered the EMP surge, a wave of energy that shot forward, straight into the heart of the enemy flagship. For a moment, nothing happened. The ship continued its advance, its weapon systems still active, and the Valdar seemed to be unaware of what was coming. Then, all at once, a powerful explosion of energy rippled across the enemy ship. The surge hit their core systems, sending shockwaves through their power grid. The flagship's lights flickered and dimmed, and for a split second, the entire fleet seemed to freeze. The Valdar ship's weapons went offline, and its shields flickered weakly before collapsing entirely. The Intrepid had done it. They had disabled the Valdar flagship. But there was no time to celebrate. As the Intrepid pulled away from the damaged ship, the rest of the Valdar fleet retaliated with a fury the crew wasn't prepared for. They had momentarily stunned their enemies, but the Valdar were not easily defeated. It was clear now that the war was far from over. "Shields are down to 30%, Jameson reported. "We're taking heavy fire from the remaining ships." "Get us out of here," Harper ordered, her voice sharp. The Intrepid was small and fast, but the Valdar had sheer numbers on their side. They couldn't stay in this fight for long. The crew scrambled, desperate to avoid the incoming onslaught. The Intrepid banked hard to the right, dodging a barrage of missiles that exploded behind them, sending shockwaves through the ship. The ship's AI compensated for the blast, stabilizing their course, but the Intrepid's hull groaned under the strain. "We need to get some distance," Ruiz said, his hands flying over the console. "I can initiate a short-range jump, but we'll need a few minutes to recharge the core before we can do it." The Valdar ships were closing in, relentless in their pursuit. The Intrepid could outrun them, but it wasn't fast enough to stay ahead forever. Harper's mind raced. They couldn't survive another wave of fire. If they didn't escape now, they'd be sitting targets. "Prepare for jump," Harper commanded. "Do whatever it takes to get us out of here." The tension in the air was thick as Ruiz worked furiously to prepare the ship's engines for the jump. Every second counted. The Intrepid shuddered under another barrage, but its shields held just long enough to keep them alive. "Jump ready, Commander," Ruiz said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Initiate it now," Harper ordered. With a sudden burst of energy, the Intrepid shot forward, its engines flaring as it tore through space. The ship blinked out of existence, vanishing into the void of space, just as the Valdar's remaining fire hit where they had been. The crew of the Intrepid breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing they had escaped death by mere seconds. But even as they made their escape, Harper couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. They had dealt a powerful blow to the Valdar fleet, but the enemy was far from defeated. The Intrepid had earned its place as the last hope of humanity, but it was only a matter of time before the Valdar would regroup and come after them again. The battle for the galaxy wasn't over. It had just begun. The U.S. Intrepid drifted through the black void of space, a lone beacon of hope in an unforgiving galaxy. The crew had just escaped the wrath of the Valdar fleet, but they knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The battle they had fought, and won, had shaken the Valdar Empire, but it hadn't broken them. Their enemy was relentless, and as the Intrepid moved into the safety of a nearby asteroid belt, the crew understood that the war was far from over. Commander Rachel Harper stood at the front of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the view screen. Beyond the thick haze of asteroids, the stars sparkled like distant memories of a peaceful time long past. She could almost hear the hum of the ship's engines, the only sound in the silence of space. But even as the Intrepid rested, Her mind was in overdrive. The Valdar Empire wouldn't stop until humanity was crushed under their boot. "Report," she said, her voice firm, as always. She needed to know where they stood, what resources they had left, and how much time they had before the Valdar found them. "Shields are at 70%, Commander," Lieutenant Jameson replied, not taking his eyes off the console. "But our weapons systems are down for at least another 24 hours. We've taken some damage, and it'll take time to make repairs." Harper nodded. The Intrepid had sustained significant damage during their escape, and they couldn't afford to take another direct hit. The Valdar would be back, and they would bring even more firepower with them. If they didn't figure out a way to level the playing field, humanity's chances of survival would be slim to none. "Commander," Ensign Daniels called out from the communication station, "we've intercepted a transmission from Earth. They've confirmed the Valdar are regrouping. The fleet is moving toward the next human colony, and they'll arrive in a matter of days." Harper's jaw clenched. The enemy wasn't wasting any time. The Valdar would strike again, and they would come harder this time. She couldn't afford to let the fleet catch up to them. "Any sign of reinforcements from Earth?" she asked. Daniels shook his head. "None. The human fleet is still recovering from the initial wave. They're mobilizing, but it's going to take a while before they can send help." Rachel's mind raced. Earth's military was strong, but they were no match for the might of the Valdar fleet. The Intrepid was humanity's best weapon, and it was their only hope. But they couldn't fight a war with just one ship. They needed to strike at the heart of the Valdar Empire, to do something that would cripple their ability to fight back. But how? "Commander," Ruiz called from engineering, breaking through her thoughts. "We've finished analyzing the Valdar ship data we gathered. There's something in their systems, something hidden beneath all their military might. If we can get to their central command, we might be able to trigger a full-scale failure of their fleet." Harper turned to him, her interest piqued. "What do you mean by central command?" Ruiz leaned forward, tapping a few keys on his console, bringing up a series of schematics on the screen. "The Valdar Empire operates through a network of central hubs that manage their fleet and all their military decisions. These hubs are located on several of their largest warships. If we can infiltrate one of these hubs and disrupt their systems, it could disable a large portion of their fleet. It wouldn't be permanent, but it would buy us the time we need to turn the tide." Harper's mind whirred with possibilities. It was a bold move, a risky one, but it was the best chance they had. Striking at the heart of the Valdar Empire could cripple their ability to command and control their forces, but getting there wouldn't be easy. "If we're going to do this, we need to be prepared," Harper said, turning to face her crew. "We're going to infiltrate one of the Valdar's flagship hubs. Ruiz, I want your team working on a way to get us past their security. Jameson, I want you to run through every possible scenario. We can't afford to fail." "We're going to need more than just stealth," Jameson replied, glancing at his tactical display. "We'll be up against their best defenses. They won't let us slip past easily. We'll have to fight our way in." "I know," Harper said, "but we don't have the luxury of playing it safe. We either take the fight to them, or we lose everything." The crew nodded, understanding the gravity of the mission ahead. They were all in this together, and they knew the stakes were higher than ever. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. They couldn't afford to hesitate. As the Intrepid slipped deeper into the asteroid belt to avoid detection, Harper gathered her senior officers in the briefing room. She had never seen them more focused, their eyes determined. There was no fear here, only the understanding that they were about to take on the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. "Here's the plan," Harper began, spreading a series of holographic maps on the table. "The Valdar flagship we'll be targeting is located in the heart of their fleet. It's heavily protected, but if we can bypass their outer defenses, we'll have a shot at getting close enough to the central command. Ruiz, can we hack into their systems remotely once we're in range?" Ruiz nodded. "Yes, Commander. I can get us access to their network, but we'll need to be inside their system's radius for it to work. Once we're in, I can trigger the EMP pulse and shut down their network. Jameson, what's our plan if they detect us before we can reach the central hub? Harper asked, already thinking of contingencies. We'll fight through, Jameson replied. We'll have to rely on our speed and agility. The Intrepid is smaller and faster than anything they have, so we'll need to use that to our advantage. We won't be able to hold out for long, but we can cause enough chaos to disrupt their plans. Harper nodded. She had faith in her crew. They had already pulled off the impossible once. There was no reason they couldn't do it again. But this time, the stakes were even higher. The Valdar Empire had proven that they would stop at nothing to crush humanity. The Intrepid was their last line of defense. Let's get ready, Harper said, standing tall. We may be outnumbered, but we're not out of options. We'll make our move when the time is right. And when we do, we'll show the Valdar that humanity is not so easily conquered. The crew set to work immediately, each person focused on their part in the plan. Harper took a moment to step back and observe them. This crew, her crew, was her greatest strength. They weren't just soldiers and officers. They were the embodiment of humanity's fighting spirit. And that was something no empire, no matter how powerful, could ever crush. As the Intrepid began its journey toward the Valdar flagship, Harper couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into the lion's den. The Intrepid had faced one impossible challenge after another, but this would be the ultimate test of their resolve. If they could succeed, they might just turn the tide of the war. If they failed, the galaxy would fall to the Valdar, and humanity with it. The U.S. Intrepid crept through the darkened expanse of space, its hull barely visible against the backdrop of distant stars and swirling nebulae. The asteroid field had provided a temporary hiding place, but it wouldn't shield them forever. The Valdar were relentless, and their fleet was vast. The clock was ticking, and the crew of the Intrepid knew that the longer they waited, the more chances they gave the Valdar to regroup and strike back. Commander Rachel Harper stood at the command station, her fingers lightly tapping against the console, and thought. The crew had worked tirelessly, prepping the ship and strategizing for the mission ahead. Every moment felt like a decision that could decide their fate, and the fate of humanity. Commander, Lieutenant Jameson called out from his post. We're approaching the Valdar flagship's location. It's heavily defended, but we've managed to pinpoint a weakness in their outer shield grid. It's not much, but it's enough for us to slip through unnoticed. If we move now, we might just have the element of surprise on our side. Harper nodded, her mind racing. This was the moment. Everything they had worked for, everything they had risked, came down to this one chance. They couldn't afford to hesitate. Take us in, Lieutenant, she ordered. And stay sharp. As the Intrepid maneuvered through the dark space toward the heart of the Valdar fleet, the tension in the air was palpable. The crew knew what was at stake, and each one felt the weight of the mission. The fate of countless lives rested on their ability to infiltrate the Valdar's central command and disable their fleet. Ruiz, the ship's engineer, was already at his station, working feverishly to stabilize the ship's systems. The Intrepid was built for speed and agility, but it wasn't invincible. Every system needed to be operating at peak efficiency for them to even have a chance at completing the mission. Shields are at 50%, Jameson reported. We're within range of their perimeter defenses. Keep us on course, Harper said, her voice calm but commanding. We'll make it through. The ship shook as incoming fire from the Valdar's outer fleet splashed harmlessly against their shields. The Intrepid was small and fast, making it hard for the Valdar to get a clear shot. But even so, the enemy ships were closing in fast. Harper watched the view screen as the enemy ships loomed larger and larger, their weapons charging, their intent clear. This is it, Jameson said, his voice tight with urgency. We're too close for comfort now. We can't afford to get hit. We won't, Harper replied, her eyes never leaving the screen. Steady. The Intrepid darted forward, cutting through space like a needle threading its way through a dense web. Each movement was calculated, deliberate. They had one shot at this. If they hesitated for even a second, the Valdar would close the gap and obliterate them. ETA to the flagship's shields. 30 seconds. Ruiz called out from engineering. We'll be in range soon. Prepare for entry, Harper ordered. Once we're through, I want the team ready to breach their systems. We're not leaving until we've struck a decisive blow. The tension on the bridge was almost unbearable. Every officer on board knew what was at stake. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to ensure that humanity had a future. If they failed, it would be the end of everything they held dear. The Valdar would sweep across the galaxy, wiping out every trace of resistance. Now, Jameson shouted as he saw the gap in the shield grid open up. The Intrepid shot forward with lightning speed, a streak of light cutting through the darkness of space. The ship lurched as they passed through the outer barrier, the shields flaring as they absorbed the shock. For a moment, everything was chaos. The Valdar ships, now aware of their presence, fired relentlessly. But the Intrepid was already past the worst of it, weaving through the thick of enemy fire like a predator stalking its prey. Direct hit. Ruiz yelled, but his tone wasn't one of panic. He was already rerouting power, hull integrity holding. We're still good. Harper gritted her teeth, her focus never wavering. They were in. Now they just needed to get to the heart of the enemy fleet. Their destination, the central command station aboard the Valdar flagship. Set course for the command center, she said, eyes narrowing. We can't waste time. On it, Jameson replied, navigating the ship through the twisting chaos of enemy warships. As the Intrepid flew deeper into the flagship, the crew felt the sheer weight of their task. The central command station was protected by layers of advanced Valdar security systems, and every second spent in their proximity made them more vulnerable. They had no idea how much longer they could keep their enemies at bay. The Valdar flagship loomed ahead, a massive, imposing structure that seemed almost alive in its mechanical design. It was a fortress, a symbol of the Valdar Empire's power. If they could infiltrate it and take down its core systems, they would deal a devastating blow to the entire fleet. But if they failed, they wouldn't get another chance. ETA to the command center. 5 minutes. Jameson called out. Harper looked at the crew, her heart beating in her chest. These were the moments they had trained for, the moments when everything hung in the balance. She knew that this wasn't just a mission to save humanity. It was a test of their very will to survive. They were fighting not just for their lives, but for every person left behind on Earth, and every colony that had yet to fall under the Valdar's brutal rule. The time was coming. They were almost there, but the Valdar would not make it easy. Harper knew that the next few minutes would be the most dangerous of their lives. They would need to fight with everything they had to ensure that their mission succeeded. Failure was not an option. Get ready, Harper said, her voice low and determined. This is where the real fight begins. As the Intrepid approached the heart of the Valdar fleet, the crew prepared for the final stage of their desperate mission. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and racing against time. But in that moment, the crew of the Intrepid was more determined than ever to turn the tide of the war. They would strike at the heart of the Valdar Empire, and they would do it together. The U.S. Intrepid had slipped past the outer defenses of the Valdar flagship, but the hardest part was yet to come. Inside the belly of the beast, the crew could feel the pressure mounting. Every second they spent in enemy territory brought them closer to either victory or utter destruction. The heart of the Valdar Empire, their command center, loomed ahead, but it was surrounded by layers of high-tech security and alien defenses that would test every ounce of their skill and determination. Commander Rachel Harper stood at the helm, her fingers clenched around the armrests of her chair as the ship weaved through the narrow, shadow-filled hallways of the flagship. The enemy was aware of their presence now. The air felt thicker, more oppressive. Every sensor, every alert on her console screamed that danger was closing in. Lieutenant Jameson, what's our status? Harper asked, her voice steady but laced with tension. Almost there, "Commander," Jameson replied, his eyes scanning his tactical display. "The command center's just ahead, but there are multiple layers of shields and energy fields protecting it. We'll need to breach them fast if we want any chance of success." "We don't have time for a slow approach," Harper said, glancing at the crew. Every officer was at their station, poised for the moment when they would breach the central command. Ruiz, the ship's engineer, was monitoring the systems closely. He had been working nonstop to ensure the ship remained operational despite the damage they'd taken earlier. "Ruiz, are we ready to punch through their defenses?" Harper asked, turning to the engineer. "Almost," Ruiz replied, his face tense with concentration. "I've rerouted power to the main pulse weapon, but it'll take a few more minutes to fully charge. We're going to need to make it to the core before the Valdar realize what we're doing." Harper nodded, her thoughts moving faster than the ship itself. They didn't have the luxury of time. The longer they stayed in this part of the flagship, the more vulnerable they became. The Valdar would call in reinforcements, and soon they would be surrounded. The only chance they had now was to strike fast and hard, disable the command center, and hope that the EMP would disable the Valdar fleet long enough for them to escape. "Jameson, can you keep us on course without being detected for much longer?" Harper asked, her gaze never leaving the view screen. Outside, the vastness of the flagship stretched out like a labyrinth, with twisting corridors and energy fields blocking their path at every turn. "It's getting tougher," Jameson replied, his fingers dancing across the console. "They've activated their internal security systems. We're picking up strange energy signatures ahead, probably some kind of automated turrets or patrols. If we don't clear them, we won't make it to the core." Harper's mind raced. If they could reach the heart of the Valdar flagship and disable its command center, it would cripple the entire fleet. But getting there was another matter entirely. The Valdar were not known for their mercy, and they were unlikely to let a single human ship slip through their defenses unchallenged. "Okay," Harper said, her voice calm but resolute. "We're going to have to take out those turrets. Jameson, get us as close as you can to their central core, and Ruiz, prep the weapons. We can't waste any more time." Ruiz nodded and began rerouting power to the ship's weapon systems, while Jameson expertly maneuvered the Intrepid through the twisting maze of corridors, dodging energy beams and enemy ships as they made their way deeper into the Valdar flagship. Every moment felt like an eternity. The sound of the ship's engines hummed through the walls, vibrating the floor beneath their feet as they neared their destination. Then the first of the Valdar's automated defense turrets came into view, its massive guns aimed directly at the Intrepid. Without warning, it opened fire, sending a barrage of plasma shots toward the ship. "Brace for impact," Harper shouted as the ship rocked violently under the force of the attack. The shields flared to life, absorbing the brunt of the blast, but the Intrepid was still thrown off course, careening into the nearby walls of the corridor. Sparks flew from the console as Ruiz worked quickly to stabilize their systems. "Shields holding," Ruiz reported, though the strain in his voice was clear. "But we can't take another hit like that." "We won't," Harper said, determination setting into her voice. "Jameson, get us into range of that turret, and fire when ready." Jameson didn't need to be told twice. He slammed his fist against the console, directing the Intrepid's weapon systems to target the turret. With a deafening roar, the ship's energy cannons fired, and a bright blast of white-hot energy collided with the turret, disintegrating it in a flash of light. "We're clear," Jameson said, his tone a mixture of relief and urgency. "But there's more ahead. We've got to keep moving." "Do whatever it takes," Harper replied, her gaze steely. "We're almost there." The Intrepid continued its path through the flagship, cutting through enemy fire with speed and precision. The crew was working in perfect sync, each person knowing their role and executing it with deadly accuracy. But as they approached the core, the opposition intensified. More turrets appeared, firing relentlessly, and Valdar warships swarmed the area, desperate to stop the intruders. "Commander, we've got company," Jameson warned. "Two Veldar destroyers are locking onto us. They're not going to let us get any closer." Harper didn't flinch. "We're not stopping," she said, her voice unwavering. "Jameson, focus on evasion. Ruiz, power up the main pulse weapon. We need it ready to breach their final defenses." The tension on the bridge was almost unbearable. The Intrepid was now caught in a deadly race against time. Every twist and turn they made, every shot fired, brought them closer to the Veldar's heart. But it also brought them closer to being overwhelmed. The destroyers were closing in, and their weapons were primed to finish the job. "Pulse weapon is online," Ruiz called out. "It's fully charged and ready to fire. We're in range of the central command center now." Harper's heart raced as she stared at the central command core ahead. This was it. One final push, and they would have a chance to cripple the Veldar fleet. She knew they couldn't afford another mistake. Failure would mean the end of humanity's fight for survival. "Jameson, do it," she said, her voice filled with grim resolve. Jameson hesitated for only a moment before hitting the fire command. The pulse weapon unleashed a devastating surge of energy that blasted through the Veldar defenses, sending shockwaves through the entire flagship. The core shuddered, and for a brief, glorious moment, the lights in the command center flickered and dimmed. But as the Intrepid made its final move toward the heart of the Veldar fleet, Harper knew that their work was far from over. The battle had only just begun. The explosion from the Intrepid's pulse weapon reverberated through the very heart of the Veldar flagship, sending shockwaves that rattled the walls and jolted the ship itself. For a split second, everything seemed to freeze, an eerie silence followed by the low hum of failing systems. The core of the Veldar fleet was vulnerable now, exposed to the might of humanity's last hope. "Shields are flickering," Ruiz said, his voice trained. "We've got only minutes before the Veldar start restoring their power grid. We have to finish this now." Harper's mind raced. They had done it. They had breached the flagship's core defenses, but that victory was only the first step. Now, the real challenge lay ahead. Securing the command center and ensuring that their strike was enough to cripple the Veldar's ability to retaliate. "Jameson," Harper said, her tone hardening, "get us to the central control room. We need to take that place down before their backup systems kick in." Jameson gripped the controls tighter. "We're almost there, Commander. But there's still heavy fire from the Veldar destroyers. They're closing in fast." Harper's gaze never wavered from the screen as the Intrepid hurtled toward the core. The bridge shook again, a series of jolts and violent tremors as the ship weaved through incoming blasts. She could feel every impact, each hit making the hull groan under the strain. But they had no choice. They had to push forward. "All hands, brace for impact," she barked. "Prepare for a hard landing at the command center." As the Intrepid approached its target, the Veldar destroyers were relentless, their weapons raining down on them with brutal precision. The Intrepid's shields were flickering under the strain, but they held, keeping the ship together just long enough to get within striking distance of their goal. "Fire on my mark," Harper said, her voice sharp as steel. "Aim for the central control node. We have one shot at this." The tension in the air was palpable. Each crew member was at the peak of their focus, eyes locked on their tasks. The enemy ships were closing in, and the Intrepid had no more room for mistakes. "Mark," Harper shouted. Jameson activated the targeting systems, and a surge of energy filled the bridge as the Intrepid fired its remaining pulse weapons. A brilliant, blinding beam shot out, hitting the control center's outer defenses with devastating force. The control room's shielding was pierced, and the Veldar's backup systems began to fail, sparks flying as the massive network of alien technology faltered under the onslaught. But as the Intrepid's weapons fired, Harper knew that they hadn't won yet. The Veldar still had forces in reserve, and their central command was only half finished in its disruption. They needed to ensure the damage was permanent. "Ruiz, can you disable the rest of their systems from here?" Harper asked. Ruiz's fingers flew across his console, I'm trying, but the Valdar have a secondary backup control system hidden deep in their core. I can't get full access from here. It's like trying to hack into a fortress." "Do what you can," Harper replied. "We'll give you cover. Jameson, take us deeper into the heart of their flagship. We need to create as much chaos as possible." Jameson nodded, guiding the Intrepid deeper into the Valdar's nerve center, cutting through twisted corridors and darkened hallways that looked like the innards of some vast alien creature. The Valdar were desperate now, scrambling to restore power, but it was too late. The Intrepid was inside, and the damage had already begun. "Commander," Ruse said, a note of urgency in his voice, "I've isolated the backup systems. I'm going to send a virus through their network. It should lock them out for good, but it'll take a few minutes to fully upload. We can't let them recover before then." Harper stood, gripping the edge of the command console as another wave of enemy fire impacted the ship. The Intrepid was far from invincible, and the Valdar were throwing everything they had at them. Yet they kept pushing forward. They were in the heart of the enemy's empire now. The crew of the Intrepid had proven time and again that they could overcome the impossible. "Jameson, bring us closer to the core," Harper ordered, her voice unwavering. "We're not leaving until that virus is in place and their central systems are down. All hands, prepare for our final strike." The ship lurched as they dove deeper into the flagship, the Intrepid narrowly avoiding more waves of incoming fire. The crew was holding their breath, knowing that any wrong move could be their last. They could feel the weight of the moment in every fiber of their being, the sheer audacity of what they were attempting. "We're almost there," Jameson yelled over the comms, his voice strained as he twisted the ship through a narrow gap between two massive enemy warships. "I can see the core. It's right in front of us." The Intrepid shot forward, a final burst of speed that brought them to the heart of the Valdar flagship. Harper could see the massive central control chamber through the view screen, its cold, alien architecture pulsing with eerie green lights. This was the nerve center, the very place where the Valdar's vast empire coordinated its war efforts. "Ruiz, upload that virus now," Harper commanded. "We have seconds before the Valdar get their act together." "I'm sending it," Ruiz shouted, his fingers flying across the console. "It's in." A sudden, violent jolt rocked the Intrepid as the Valdar flagship's core systems began to collapse. Energy flared in every direction, and the entire ship trembled as the alien network was locked out. Sparks flew as the systems failed, and the Valdar flagship began to lose power, one system at a time. Harper exhaled slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. They had done it. They had dealt a crippling blow to the Valdar fleet. The command center was dead, and the rest of their forces would soon follow. "Get us out of here, Jameson," Harper ordered. "Now." Jameson didn't need to be told twice. He slammed the throttle forward, and the Intrepid surged away from the collapsing core of the Valdar flagship. The crew felt the shudder of the ship as they made their escape, the massive Valdar fleet now in disarray. As the Intrepid soared through the debris field of the wrecked flagship, the crew knew that they had won. It wasn't just a victory for humanity. It was a turning point in the war. The Valdar Empire had been struck down by a single ship, one crew, and their indomitable will to survive. The crew looked at one another, exhausted but victorious. Their mission was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, they felt the spark of hope. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and no empire, no matter how vast, could crush the will of humankind.